I don't necessarily think I'm the expert in any of this stuff. And I pull in the experts to do it, right? And so there are data sources available for the sales values. There are data sources available for the rental rates and things like that. AirDNA for the short-term rental rates. And so I just leverage their data, and they're the experts and they're just feeding it into it. And I just happen to just link everything together in one place.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 333. My guest today loves short-term rentals, and a few years ago, he set out to create a platform to bring the tools of industry giants to the normal investor. Masrur Huq is the founder of Dynamic.RE, a PropTech solution that leverages big data to help real estate investors increase their profitability and run their rentals and Airbnbs. Today, we're going to discuss level 1 due diligence and how to determine a property's highest and best use. Masrur, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I love being here. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you for coming. And I want to thank you for making the trip to our RPOA annual conference, which is where we met. Tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to the RPOA annual conference, especially because you're from Phoenix, right?
That is correct. Yeah, I'm based out of Phoenix. I've been in real estate investing side for about 8-9 years now. Actually, I had met Jennifer through the short-term rental space. I had jumped in on a Zoom with them. And I think that's where I started getting ads or something along the lines of the invitation for the RPOA event. And so I just booked my ticket and went over there. I didn't really know anybody in that market. I didn't know what I was doing, but you guys were talking about all the fun stuff that I love to hear about. So I decided I would show up.
Fantastic. Yeah. Every year, for those listening, every year the RPOA has an annual conference. It's usually the last Thursday and Friday in February. I'm sure that's where we met. And I'm glad to hear that it was the Short-Term Rental Association that you were involved with that actually is what brought you out to join us.
Yeah, I'll be there every year. Every time you guys put it on, I will 100% be there.
Fantastic. I love to hear that. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, you're not just a tech guy and an entrepreneur, but you also own rental property and invest in real estate. Tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
So I am not originally a tech guy. So I was in sales for a lot of my life. I got severance out of my job. They laid off over 35% of the management that year nationwide. And I knew real estate was going to be the path I wanted to take. I actually even took the real estate licensing course during the time I was working. And I realized that being a realtor wasn't the avenue that was speaking to me. And so a friend of mine asked me if I wanted to get into the investing side. And so we went through a course and a network and started building our company, did a few flips. And over the years, we just refined what our strategies would be. And that led me into rentals, into short-term rentals. I love to travel. So short-term rentals was always a part of my landscape. And so I'm glad that I got a chance to really dive in and understand the opportunities behind it.
What asset classes then are you investing in? I hear short-term rentals in there, maybe some fix and flips. What all have you been doing?
I don't do fix and flips as much anymore. We'll still take them on if the numbers make sense. Single family rentals, short-term rentals is really where I'm at.
Let's segue into the tech, because when I met you here in Grand Rapids, you showed me this app or this technology that you had created that basically it kind of helps you figure out what is the highest and best use of a property. Is it a traditional rental? Is it a fix and flip or a rehab? Or is it a vacation rental? And it actually breaks down all those options and runs the numbers for you. So tell us a little bit about that type of due diligence and how you decided to put that into some sort of tech solution?
So I consider everything as a puzzle piece. And when we started adding rentals and short-term rentals into our strategy, we all have our process for running our due diligence. We have to look at numbers here. And then when we added rentals, we started adding another resource to run the numbers there. And then when we added short-term rentals, we added another resource for research there. And that process started taking longer and longer as we started looking at more properties for more, strategy and exit strategy on how we wanted to figure that out. And that process didn't make sense to me. I figured all the data is out there, but for some reason, it's not all in one place. And so again, I think about it in puzzles, and I just put those puzzle pieces together, essentially is what we built in our platform.
So take us through that process. I mean, when you or someone else finds a property, what's the thought process and due diligence that goes into determining its highest and best use?
So one of the very first things we look at is what is the sales price currently? What's the estimated sales price and where it's at? If we're looking at a wholesale or a fix and flip opportunity, then we just have to work our numbers backwards from that point on and make sure that we can purchase it correctly to make sense of where it is at the sales price. Furthermore, does it work as a rental? Does the rental rate support our purchase price at that point and what our financing is going to look like? And if it does, then great, checkbox number one. Checkbox number two, when we look at short-term rentals, we're looking at least 2.5 times the rent. So it has to be a good rental first, and then we're looking at 2.5 times the rent for it to be something that we dig into a little bit deeper for the short-term rental strategy. So basically, we just wanted to make an easy way to be able to see all three numbers in one place. So that way we can navigate that structure accordingly and quicker, because if we're running 100 properties at a time, I don't want to spend 30 minutes just putting in property by property. I want to be able to say yes or no as quick as we can.
And where is this data coming from? Like, how do you know what its rental rate would be versus what you could get from renting it out as a short-term rental?
It's the same thing on how I approach real estate to begin with as well. So going back to that puzzle piece, I don't necessarily think I'm the expert in any of this stuff. And I pull in the experts to do it, right? And so there are data sources available for the sales values. There are data sources available for the rental rates and things like that. AirDNA for the short-term rental rates. And so I just leverage their data, and they're the experts and they're just feeding it into it. And I just happen to just link everything together in one place.
You're aggregating from these sources. What are the sources specifically?
So I'm actually switching a couple of the sources, but our main kicker is AirDNA for the short-term rental data. There's another source that we use just for the rental data, and then there's a separate source that we get for the county information and the sales value. So that's the one that I'm actually considering on changing moving forward.
Are you also projecting expenses as well?
Not yet. So part of the entire vision is to include the process and people that are required in every transaction and every investment. So ideally, I would love to have, so we're just now putting in the spreadsheets that I use for our deal analysis. We're trying to put that into our software as well. So that way you can run your expenses. You can, organize your portfolio even in our software. But also furthermore, I'd love to have the people involved as well. So, if there's property management companies that you work with, cool, have them sign off and say it's a go, or, lenders and insurance agents and anything like that. I want to have those people as part of the process as well.
Let's talk about AirDNA for a moment. When you showed me would you call it an app or a software solution? I mean, what exactly would you?
It's a software platform. It's not an app quite yet. It will be an iOS and Android app soon, hopefully.
When you showed it to me, you were aggregating a lot of data from AirDNA. And I remember asking you, how is it you're able to use this information? Because it was pretty detailed information. And I know AirDNA, and by the way, if anyone listening is into vacation rentals, renting out and owning vacation rentals, they should probably know what AirDNA is, right? So why don't you just explain to people what that is?
AirDNA is an industry standard for short-term rental and Airbnb information that worldwide. So they aggregate global data. They're basically hooked into Airbnbs and VRBOs, the data, and they basically compile all that data and showcase it in as far as estimated revenue, occupancy, and nightly rates. So you can get to see that kind of information on a So on a property basis, as well as AirDNA, through their software, you can see a lot more of the market basis. So you can see all the properties that are within that market. You can see how they're doing, for their paid subscriptions. You can see the comparables. You can see the history. You can see all sorts of that good stuff.
You're able to take this AirDNA information and then kind of rework it in a different format that actually layers in some other sources as well. What would someone look at and see when they look at your product?
One of the biggest things with AirDNA was that it's on a market level. So, if you're looking at, Grand Rapids as an entire market, but then let's say you're also looking at Detroit for an entire market, or Atlanta or Phoenix or whatever the case, AirDNA works on a market by market level. And we deal in nationwide, and it was going to get really expensive for us to do an entire country's worth of data and being able to run all those numbers. And so there had to be a better solution. And I didn't want other investors to feel kind of that pinch as well. And so what we did was we took it on a property by property basis as opposed to the market level. And so within our software, you can search a property anywhere in the country and look at just the numbers for that property. We added market level data as well. So that way you didn't have to get a subscription for a specific market. You can get, you can run it for the property that you're looking at, regardless of where it is in the country.
When you're running this for yourself, and it sounds like you might have a lot of properties that you're kind of doing due diligence on all at once, where are you finding all these properties? How is it you have this list of properties that you're plugging into this program?
So that's just the puzzle piece of deal flow, right? And for the puzzle piece of deal flow, it could be wholesalers, it could be other agents, it could be friends of yours, it could be anybody that is interested in real estate. It could just be as easy as your dentist. It could be any one of those pieces that can really just get you to see, hey, I have a property and I don't know what to do with it. It's just one of those conversation pieces that it just comes about for me, I guess, in conversation with anybody and everybody.
Take us through the process on a real property that you've acquired. Something you found, the due diligence you did, what it suggested, and how it turned out in reality. One
of my favorite examples was how I got started in the Airbnb space to begin with. A mentor of mine a while back said, I asked him, how do I get started in Airbnbs? And he said, manage it for other people. And I said, okay. So I figured out what it takes to manage short-term rental, which I brought it down to three main aspects. It's guest communication, calendar management and pricing, and turnover management. And once I figured out how to optimize and learn how to navigate those three tasks, I started telling people about it. And I told all of my investor friends that were doing fix and flips if they had any properties that they were considering on keeping. And so I had one of my best friends tell me, hey, I'm working on this property. I think it's a great hold, but I don't know what the numbers are. Can you check the numbers? So at that time, I hopped on to AirDNA, checked out the numbers, sent it over, and she said, cool, this makes sense. Can you manage it for me? And I said, okay, great. So that's where the co-hosting model came into play. And I can talk a little bit about the difference on co-hosting and property management. But basically, she gave me the keys to her house and I just started managing the Airbnb. And, I invoiced her for the services that we provided. And boom, now I'm in the Airbnb space at that point. So, there's another reason. One of the main reasons I called it dynamic is because I feel like real estate in itself provides you the ability to kind of move fluidly as long as you know the strategies and how to make use of the tools that you have. And so for that purpose, for any beginner investors out there, we were able to start our Airbnb without money, without funding, without a property even. That's how we were able to navigate that landscape just to get in there. We still manage that property now. It's been 4.5 years at this point. And yeah, it's been a great journey otherwise. She was the first one to give me a chance.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com. So how did it work out for her? I mean, you managed this, you showed her what it was going to get on AirDNA, you managed it. Was AirDNA accurate? And how accurate does AirDNA typically end up being?
I think going back to, I consider it level one due diligence. There's factors that we look at that, is either going to make sense or not, but you always want to take it with a grain of salt. AirDNA and any other data aggregators are going to be looking at averages. They're only looking at what's going on around in the market, what's going on around in that neighborhood, and what other properties are doing. And if that's the case, there are great property managers, and then there's horrible property managers that'll bring that average down. So, you have to kind of also base yourself on how good of a management company or how good you can optimize your revenue. Those make a difference as well, but we consider it more of a baseline. So something like occupancy rate, for example, if it's 65% and below, well, that makes me think about how much of a demand there is, because I can't necessarily change demand by a lot if people aren't going to that area. So if it's only, 40% occupancy, then there's just not people coming into that area. And that's harder to battle than if it's a 70% occupancy rate, which means, hey, as long as I can make people happy, there's people around here that'll still come to my home.
You talked about the difference between managing and co-hosting. Real quick, what is that difference?
It's different in a lot of places. So do your own due diligence in that regard. But the way I look at it is property management is more full service. They handle the maintenance. They handle everything about the home. They handle the finances, and everything is almost in-house. The property management company owns the listing. They own everything about the listing, and they manage everything. And then they disperse the returns to the owner after the fact. On the co-hosting model, it's a little bit different. I consider it more like you're the driver of the car, but it's your owner's car and they're sitting in the passenger seat with you. And so we handle the guest communication, we handle the turnover management, and then the calendar and pricing management. But basically, we're co-hosts on their Airbnb listing. So even if they fire us for some reason, it's their listing. They can take it wherever they want to go. But basically, we invoice them at the end of the month. And so we don't take in any of their funds or anything like that. We just handle all the services required to optimize their listing and manage their listing.
You talked about level one due diligence. I'm wondering if there's a level two due diligence. But first of all, what else is involved in level one due diligence for you?
Level one due diligence is just looking at, where the sales value numbers are, where the rental rates are, and where the short-term rental rates are. Level two due diligence is going to be more of looking at what the comparables are looking like. Can I justify the numbers that were based on the level one? What else is going on in that market? Is there any other factors I should consider? And so those are all the things that we do want to implement into our software as well. Something like population, migration, job diversity, demographics. Is there an Amazon warehouse coming into town? All of those things play a difference when you're looking at cash flow and appreciation. So if it's a long-term hold for a rental, great. If there's an Amazon warehouse coming into town, then I know that I can bank on that.
Why don't we take a look at your product, your software there? For those of you listening, we'll describe what we're looking at. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, because this is available on YouTube, you'll be able to see what we're all looking at here.
The website is Dynamic.RE, and this is our main landing page. And we offer a number of services, property valuation, nationwide co-hosting, real estate investing startup guides, market deep dives. I do a lot of consultation and advisory, but for our property evaluation, here I was actually looking at a property earlier. Let me go back to this dashboard here. So this is where we look for our dashboard. So these are all the properties that we've looked at. And so if I click into any one of these guys, this is what it looks like for anybody jumping in. So it shows the picture of the property. I can do a satellite and a street view of Google Maps here and kind of run around the neighborhood if I really wanted to. But here is the bread and butter. So we have on the left side here, we have the estimated value, both high and low. It's, again, grain of salt, the market is moving fast. And so people are paying more than asking price. And so this is, again, just a baseline. Secondary box here, we have the traditional rental rate. So if you were to do a traditional rental, it says, hey, in this area, the monthly rent, for this property is about $1,500. And if it was annualized, we're looking at about $18,000. And so I can actually put that number up against the short-term rental number here, which is $54,000 if it was to be a short-term rental. So that's the short-term rental annual revenue. Now it gives me an idea of what the nightly rate is going to be, and it also gives me an idea of what the occupancy is going to be. And so now I can take a look at that and kind of think about, okay, well, is the occupancy justifiable? Do I feel comfortable with 60%, or am I looking more for 70 and above? Is there enough people coming into that area? Below here is all county information. So property information, I can get into like who owns the property. So this is great for wholesalers that are trying to look for leads or distressed properties. You can kind of know who to talk to in that regard. And so that's actually another conversation. So I consider myself a solutions-based engineer. I call myself a solutions engineer, right? And so when we talk to sellers or distressed homeowners, we show them this the same way, just to show them what the value is in any direction that they would want to go. And so, before in the wholesaling realm of things, it was just a low cash offer. But if you understand the numbers and you can educate towards the numbers, well, we can navigate a deal so it's beneficial to all the parties involved. So if the homeowner did want to sell, great, they have a baseline on what the values are, but cool, now we'll subtract any repairs necessary or anything like that. If they want to make it into a rental, great, we can talk about how to structure that and how to make that happen. And then if they're interested in short-term rentals, great, we can navigate the conversation on how to make that happen as well.
It's pretty stunning to me that as a traditional rental, you're going to clear just under $19,000 a year. Right. That's gross. But as a short-term rental, you're closer to $55,000. That's a very stunning difference.
And so that's kind of why we look at the 2.5 times the number, because technically we want to make sure that it's a traditional rental first. As a short-term rental, we're taking on the load of, the mortgage payment and the utilities and all the other expenses involved. And so we have that cushion and buffer, but then we also have to build in our profit.
Do you ever see a scenario where it makes more sense as a traditional rental than a short-term rental?
100%. And that's kind of where we do the lease option model as opposed to a traditional rental. And so there are absolute opportunities where we look at both. And yeah, we'll make that decision accordingly based on the property. Anything
else here you want to make sure, those watching on YouTube can see?
Something that I just added and I'm building on is this little market data tab. So as what I've shown you guys already, I provide 10 free searches for everybody. So you guys can hop onto the website, type in an address and check out your numbers, and you can do up to 10 for free. I also made it available for kind of newbies and starting people because, a lot of the other softwares out there, you have to pay a monthly subscription for, $30 a month, $50 a month. But the way I wanted to run it was actually give an opportunity to low volume users. So even if you're not doing a lot, you can do it at 50 cents per property. And so even if you're searching 10 properties a month or whatever the case, you can do it at just 50 cents. So that way you can just get your balls rolling a little bit. So that's what you get. So what I've just showed you is what you get for the 10 free searches and the 50 cents per property. But I also started including a little bit of a deep dive here. So this market data tab, it's a $10 report. And so we charge it at the end of the month. But so this will actually give you a little bit more of an overview of the market and what's around in that area. So I can actually see everybody else's kind of trending lines as far as the average daily rate, occupancy rate, and the revenue. Now, this is based on the zip code specifically. So it's not based on the city, it's based on the zip code. So this is what's happening in the zip code. It's a little bit more granular. There's not that many hosts. There's only one other host in the zip code. So that I kind of considered as like a confidence level of where I'm at specifically. And then, how many other hosts are there? What's their rental activity like? I can actually see if I go into this short-term rental comparable, this pulls it a little bit further away from the zip code, but I can actually see other properties and what they're actually making. So this revenue number is a 12-month rolling revenue number. And so this property has made $31,000 in the last 12 months. And if I really wanted to compare, I can go ahead and click the link here and it'll take me to that Airbnb listing. And so that way I can kind of see, how do they decorate their home? Are there any amenities that I want to consider to compete with them? What are their star ratings? What are their reviews saying? And I can kind of just jump in and do a deep dive on their property specifically. I'm not going to wait for the internet here, but it gives you a list of all those comparables. If I go into the sales aspect of things, I can see actually what's on the market and how long it's been on the market and what price it's at. So I can kind of navigate my conversation as far as my purchase side of things. And then on the rental rates, same thing. These are rental units that's been coming up in the area recently and what they're priced at. So I can kind of navigate and validate that level 1 due diligence essentially. Does that make sense?
That's a lot of great information to do that due diligence with.
Yeah, I know I went through a lot really quick. So
thank you for that. The website is Dynamic.RE.com?
No, it's just .RE.
Oh, so it's just Dynamic.RE. What advice do you have for our listeners and viewers as far as doing that level 1 due diligence to help determine a property's highest and best use?
I have 2 pieces of advice. One related to level 1 due diligence. And for that, I would say it's keep an open mind on how you can navigate the numbers. Once you have the data, it gives you a lot more power on what you can do with that data to be able to offer a solution. And sequentially, my second piece of advice is keep an open mind on what the opportunities are available. If you are open to those opportunities finding you, then they will find you. But if you're really kind of hone in on, I have to do it one way, and that's the only way, that hasn't been the experience of my life. I think I've learned to understand the tool that I was given. But once I have this tool belt, I can now offer a solution to anybody and everybody. And that's why I think where the real power comes into play as far as success goes.
How would someone find out more about you or get a hold of you?
Dynamic.RE is the number one place. Secondary, my website or my email, masrurhuq.com, MASRURHUQ@gmail.com. I want to make it as super easy as possible for people to get a hold of me. So yeah, feel free to get a hold of me anywhere, anytime. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all of those places.
I want to thank you for coming on the show and talking about level 1 due diligence, especially how you apply it to the vacation rental space. I also want to just say thanks for coming out to our RPOA annual conference like you did last month here in Grand Rapids. It was a pleasure seeing you. I look forward to seeing you again next year. And thank you so much for having this conversation with us. It's been a real pleasure.
It's been an honor, Brian. I plan on being back in Michigan soon, but I always plan on going back to the RPOA next year.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. And you can also ask questions and join us on Facebook by going to RPOA, Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.